Well, I'm delighted to introduce to you and to welcome to Wilshire Malcolm Guite. Malcolm is here with us. He is a poet and a priest in the Church of England, a Cambridge man, as a matter of fact, but he is here with his cowboy boots. So
still shiny, only bought them yesterday.
Just bought them yesterday, and he's taking them back, and it's going to be a whole new thing in England, I think, as a matter of fact, right? So Malcolm is here because he is great friends with Mike Capps in our church, who is the chair of the board of Image, and also Executive Director Greg Penoya is here, and they have a table in the James Gallery in case you would like the 100th edition of the Image Journal, which is an organization and a journal that promotes faith and the arts. And Malcolm's been a great spokesperson, a writer for them, and he's been here in Dallas for several days, and some of us have had a wonderful opportunity to get to know him and hear from him. But Malcolm, as we have a moment here, I want to say that there's an interesting thing about your relationship to words, and another side of that as well, because words are really what brought you to faith to begin with,
Indeed,
right?
yes.
I mean, in the beginning was the Word,
exactly so,
and you came to understand something about the power of the Christian message through words. I know that was
yes, indeed.
what led you.
It was not just simply words as cold, dry words, but words that kindle the imagination. You know, once I had to do a series of exercises and thoughts about putting down into one sentence what you think you're on earth to do. Yes. And mine was to use my love of language and my delight in language to kindle my own and other people's imagination for Christ.
Lovely. Because
it was the language of poets and writers like C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, but also for me, George Herbert, John Donne, these poets who made me realize that I couldn't just shut God out, that at one time, before I began to read that poetry deeply, I thought science had everything taped and we were all just a bunch of enzymes unwinding blindly in the dark. But when you read great poetry, you think, that's not a chemical reaction. That's a living spirit.
Lovely. So while that's true, and how words break open things in us and create new things at the same time because of the nature of words, yet you have an interesting paradox in how often in your poetry you talk about silence.
Indeed.
So words are your stock in trade, and yet silence is also so important. Talk about the relationship between the two.
Well, they're really important. I mean, in a sense, only in silence you speak the word. But I think the art of poetry, both for the writer and the reader, is fundamentally the art of listening, and you need silence and quiet to listen in. And I think what a poem should do is enrich the silence that follows it. Your own great poet, I think perhaps one of the greatest living American poets, Wendell Berry, has a poem called How to Be a Poet. And I have it pinned up in my little hut where I write. And in that poem, he has these lines advising poets. He says, try to make a poem that does not obscure the silence from which it comes.
Lovely. Well, you have written poems for worship, which is quite extraordinary, and yet we don't have a common practice here, maybe yet, of using poems in worship other than Scripture. But you have a poem that illustrates this very sense of coming from the silence and and I think it would be beautiful to read it at this time. It's called The Singing Bowl, and the image of it, it's also the title of this particular volume, and the image is of a glass or a bowl where if you put your finger around it, it begins to sing, right?
Yes, and I'm glad to, of course, because you have Scripture, you always have poetry in your worship, because the Scripture and the Psalms are full of poetry. But I'm glad to read this one to you because you're right at the beginning of worship. When I wrote this, I thought it was about how to begin writing a poem, which it is, but I also realize now it's about how to begin in your prayer and worship. So, begin the song exactly where you are. Remain within the world of which you're made. Call nothing common in the earth or air. Accept it all, and let it be for good. Start with the very breath you breathe in now, this moment's pulse, this rhythm in your blood, and listen to it, ringing, soft and low. Stay with the music. Words will come in time. Slow down your breathing. Keep it deep and slow. Become an open singing bowl whose chime is richness rising out of emptiness and timelessness resounding into time. And when the heart is full of quietness, begin the song exactly where you are.